How's it going, everyone? My name is Kasperanza, and today I want to talk about a new series that I'm going to start. I'm going to call it Monster Studies. And yes, I am using it as a kind of tongue-in-cheek to make fun of gender studies and women's studies. But I'm actually kind of serious about it. I think monster studies in many ways would be a kind of I think it would be very similar to women's studies, but like in a good way, like in a positive way. It's not going to be this ideological leftist nonsense where like the patriarchy is bad, wokeism is good. We need this fake equality in movies and art and stuff like that. Like monster studies to me is as a topic will be a kind of real humanities because I think monsters and humans are essentially the same thing. I think they kind of go in and out of each other. I think they're constantly merging and metamorphizing with each other. And monsters have always been like a really exciting thing for me. And what really got me interested in monsters philosophically, I've talked about this before, but I have to say it again. It was my professor when I had to write some English paper for his class. His topic was monsters. We had to write an essay on monsters. And ever since then, I didn't realize just how philosophical monsters go, just how much monsters are connected to um, the deep meanings of life, what life means, and the humanities. And again, the humanities are so important. It's really sad that the universities have been taken over by the ideological left and have converted genuine people who want to educate themselves into these nasty, negative, hateful people who have become racist and sexist. I mean, they hate white straight men. They just want to replace men. It's awful that the humanities has turned into that, and like hating the United States and hating America and hating the West, and there's something wrong with, and as I really want to change that and really reinsert that the humanities are important. And look, I'm all for money. When you go to university, I don't think you should major in the humanities. No way. Don't waste your money. Don't waste your time. Not only because the humanities are bad in the universities, but also you need to make money. I mean, it's important to make money. It's important to take care of yourself. It's important to provide value in the free market. But I also think it's very important that you study the humanities in some way. Um, I think if the universities were serious about the humanities would be free. Students would voluntarily go to humanities classes. Teachers would voluntarily go, and like the whole thing would be free. It would be kind of like Aristotle or Plato, where they just sit around. I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but like they just sit around in a circle and they just talk about ideas freely. Or like they pick a book, a philosophical book, and then they just talk about like, well, what does love mean and what does life mean? And that's how the humanities should have reflected something back then in ancient Greece, in my opinion. And right, but it doesn't. So you got to study the humanities, but you got to do it for yourself. And you can do it for yourself. It's really easy. I mean, it's not that hard, but why do you study the humanities? You study the humanities because it's so important for a human being to have a good understanding of art and culture and literature and history and philosophy because these are the subjects that make us human. Engineering does not make you human. Medicine does not make you human. Physics does not make you human. These subjects are really good at manipulating reality and achieving goals and values, but humanities help us answer or ask the question, what are our values? What do we really want out of life? How do we act and live in a way that is humane and good and correct? Right? How do we really live? Because on the one hand, it's really important to make money, but on the other hand, how much money do you need? And how far are you willing to go to make money? You know, I mean, if you study computer programming or engineering or medicine, that's really great, but like, how far are you going to take it? What are you going to do with your medicine? Are you going to use it to hurt people? Are you, when you program stuff, are you going to make games that are worth making? Are you going to program AI technology and not think about the consequences? The humanities are all about this stuff. It's all about like really asking the deeper questions of why we're doing things. And so, again, monster studies to me are fundamental to the humanities. I think monsters underlie so much stuff philosophically. And so, like, if I was a professor, if I were to become a professor at a university, I would get a PhD in monster studies. And so I feel like this series that I'm going to start is like my attempt to get a PhD in monster studies. It's like my own like way of learning and studying monsters because it's just something that's really meaningful to me. And it's not, again, it's not really so much about the title of PhD, but I just really want, I feel like it's almost my responsibility or my purpose to understand what monsters are really, really about. And so yeah, when that professor had us write an essay on monsters, the very first question, the very first day, he asked us what the purpose of the humanities were. The other thing is like I used to be an objectivist. I'm a big fan of Ayn Rand, and the thing about objectivism is that I think it works really well between rational human beings where everything makes sense. But what happens when identities start to break down? What happens when humans are irrational? What happens when humans are monstrous? That's what kind of moved me to Satanism because I think Satanism embraces this monster aesthetic and this learning about monsters. And so when I think about monsters, I think of reality and identities changing really, really quickly. And it's like, how does that have anything to do with monsters? I'll talk about it soon, and as I go through my monster series, you'll understand why. But like, when identities change, and when you don't know what identities really are, when you're not sure when something is something and when it's not something, I think people can become spooked and they become monsters themselves and everything kind of devolves into like this chaos without any order or structure. And um it it's almost like monsters eating each other alive or something like that. As I can see in my notes, which are not as good as they could be. Um but monsters to me are a kind of worship of or a kind of love for experiencing different realities, different ontologies, if I'm using that word correctly. It's about loving the different monsters and the different life forms and the different creatures and the different way of living life as opposed to the center, which is God, right? So it's not a worship of the center, it's not a worship of God anymore, where everything has its perfect logic and everything makes sense and everything is ordered. Monsters are about embracing the chaos, loving the alternative of life, and seeing the beauty in the different alternatives of life, the fragmented life forms, and worshiping the fringe and the fragmented instead of the center, which I don't think there's a center anymore. I think human beings ourselves, well, I mean, if you really look at God and society and what it is, I don't really believe that we really have a center. I think we've always been in chaos. I think the universe has always been dark. I just think for the first time in human history, we're starting to realize that God was never here. We've always been these monstrous creatures, and we've always been a part of the fringe. And now we should just explore the fringe of the fringe and explore other ways of living and truly experiencing the universe for what it is, if that makes any sense. So, anyway, so for this monster series, I want to basically make one video a month on a bunch of different, so like I have all of these different topics of monsters, and for like once a month, I'm going to do research on one of these topics and make a video on it. Or maybe once every week or 2 weeks. It kind of depends on the topic. If the topic is really complex, then it's probably going to take me a month, while other topics, it might only take me a couple days or a week. But on average, or at the minimum, I want to get out at least one video a month on this monster studies series. And if this series does well, if it's popular, I want to write a book on this because I like originally I was writing a book on this, but then I started to realize that like I don't think anyone's gonna read it. I'm not an academic. I'm not qualified. I'm nobody. No one pays attention to me, so I feel like a book would be kind of pointless. And on top of that, I really just want to talk about monsters already. Like writing a book, like you have to keep it to yourself for a really long time. And then even when you publish it, I don't even know if anyone's going to read it. So I just want to start talking about it and start getting my ideas out there. And if my ideas are popular and they do well, then maybe I'll write a book on it. But just to see if there's an audience. And oh yeah. And when I do these topics, as you'll notice, like you'll see like a bunch of like it seems like it's in order. When I actually make the videos, I don't think I'll do them in any particular order. I think I'm just going to pick a topic that I think is relevant or interesting, and there we go. But I did, as I was making this, so like there's like a bunch of different like sections or categories. Like I like to think of this as like my class curriculum. Like if you were if I was a professor and you were going to have me um again, I'm not anywhere close to a professor, but I like to think, I like to dream, I like to imagine that if I was a professor, this would be the curriculum. Like if you got your syllabus, here's all of the topics that we're going to go through. And each lecture is like 45 minutes on one of the topics. Each topic is a YouTube video. And so yeah, so the different topics are, so this is the introduction. We're going to talk about the origin and the etymology of monster. And then teratology and teratophilia is like love of monsters and the study of monsters. So you could say another name for monster studies would be teratology. I have a PhD in teratology, or I'm striving for a PhD in teratology. Um, and then we're going to talk about typology, so like the different types of monsters, right? So there's monsters that are like really, really big. What makes them monstrous is their size. Other monsters are like their deformities. Other monsters are like, are they mythical or magical? Are they realistic? Other monsters are they spiritual, like ghosts? So we're going to talk about the different types of monsters. I think we're also going to talk about biology because again, as I said earlier, I feel like monsters is kind of like the different ways that life forms can be. Like it's like the possibility or alternative creatures and life forms. And so I almost think of life as like you should just study life to understand monsters and the possibility of different creatures. You should study the creatures that already exist and you'll get a good sense of monsters. So I want to like study the animal kingdom, biology, and then I also have card games, which is like Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic the Gathering. I know it sounds kind of nerdy and dumb, but um what I love so much, so I have Yu-Gi-Oh cards. What I love is that every single card in the game is its own monster. Like there's literally hundreds of thousands of different creatures and monsters in these card games. And it is so beautiful to see all of the different creatures and their art. Like this is my favorite um uh monster, Kaios, the Shadow Monarch. He's literally one of my favorite monsters I've ever had the pleasure to play with. um Also, like, Tour Guide of the Underworld is probably what like also one of my favorite monsters ever. Um and also Rescue Rabbit. Like if you combine these two cards, I feel like you get my persona in a lot of ways. And also, hold on one sec. Light and Darkness Dragon. These three cards make up my persona. So like as we go through the different topic of monsters, think of me as a tour guide of the underworld, right? We're gonna go into hell, like Dante's Inferno, right? So tour guide of the underworld is like Virgil in Dante's Inferno. You're Dante, you're gonna get on her bus and she's gonna walk you through. And then you're gonna get rescued by Rescue Rabbit as you're taken back up to the surface away from hell after we've dug deep into the depths and we've learned about morality of light and dark with Light and Darkness Dragon. I know I seem so nerdy, but like I don't know. I love Yu-Gi-Oh cards and monster cards because there's all of these different types. Like, right, this is a beast, if you can see it. I don't think it's gonna focus, but like you see the word beast right there next to my finger, right? This is a fiend. This is obviously a dragon. So like so I really want to talk about like the different types of creatures, like the different types of like dragons and monsters and plants. Here's another dragon, dark arm dragon. And then like winged beasts, right? Dark Samorg and uh Mist Valley Avian. These are the winged beast monsters and Caius the Shadow Monarch, he's another fiend. Um yeah, so like I love trading card games because they talk about all of the different possibilities and types of monsters there are, and they have like a really great organizational system, almost like a scientist like organizing, plants and crap. Okay, so we have that. So here are so after we go through like the introduction and stuff, here are like the topics. So evil, dualism, knowledge and power, incredible sizes and forces. I should have Here, let me add this. Incredible sizes, distances and forces. Predator and prey, limits, diseases, machines and abstractions. So those are like the main topics. Like you could think of these as different chapters of a textbook. So like, chapter 6, predator and prey. Chapter 7, limits, right? So for the first chapter we're going to talk about evil because evil is like when people think of a monster, it's always something to do with someone who's immoral, right? Monsters are terrible, terrible people. So, we got narcissist, right? Narcissist is such a buzzword. Everyone is accusing people of narcissists, right? And I feel like to call someone a narcissist is to call them a monster, but I think that should be looked into. Like as we go through this curriculum, we're going to really ask ourselves like what is so monstrous about a narcissist? And why are we attacking narcissists? I mean, narcissists are people too, They may not be nice people, they may be mean people, but they're still humans. They're still part of the human race. They're still people that need to be seen for their humanity, as much as we might dislike them. And then I think vampires are a monstrous face for narcissists. So like we'll also talk about how like mythical creatures and like fantasy monsters are faces for real monsters or real evil. So like vampires to me are like the monstrous face of a narcissist. And then we'll talk about psychopaths. Oh yeah, and then Dracula is like a type of vampire. So we'll get down to specifics. But and so like psychopaths. Um, again, I really like Ayn Rand, and she at the very beginning of like her career, she admired a psychopath, which I think is really interesting. And it's so funny. Like a lot of people are just like, see, look at how evil the right wing is. Ayn Rand, the philosopher of selfishness, she admired a psychopath. So she's a psychopath, and the whole right wing is a psychopath. And, that's like the point of this monster studies curriculum is to kind of like, well, why did she find that psychopath interesting? Are there anything good about psychopaths? Are psychopaths really bad people? You know, like what does it mean to be good and what does it mean to be evil? We're going to get into that. I also think that we're going to talk about borderlines because they're kind of like narcissists or like they go to with narcissists. And I think werewolves are. I had to get my wings on. I forgot to put them on. Uh, it's like every other video, I forget my wings. But this time I remembered my wings in the middle of the video. So anyway, back to what we were talking about. So yeah, we have a lot of really savory and awesome characters here. We got psychopaths, borderlines, Machiavellians, sadists, and masochists. Marquis de Sade, he's a very interesting person that I think has a lot to do with monstrosity. Um, Rapists, pedophiles, school shooters, serial killers, and then villains like cartoon villains or like, made up villains like Darth Vader, Lord Voldemort, right? It would be interesting to just do a video on Darth Vader. Um, or like, and some of these videos I feel like are going to be too controversial. Like, I don't even know if I'll even talk about them. I might just like write like a blog post instead because to ask questions like why where did they come from, what exactly makes someone. I mean, it's just, so I don't know, like I'm almost afraid to talk about it. Again, a lot of these subjects are really dark, but like the point is, the whole point of like monster studies is to kind of like, it's not so much about demonizing and hating these people but like understanding where they come from. And again, it's like, really, you want to understand and empathize with someone like, the Columbine shooters? But like, I think it would be really interesting because if you can see the perspective of an evil person, it's easier to spot these people. It's easier to help these people. It's easier to, um, and they might teach you something. I'm not saying they're good people. I don't want to defend them. But there's a lot of like with Ayn Rand and the William Hickman guy. They might have qualities that are worth learning from. Like you could learn from these people. You can learn how to protect yourself by stepping into their minds to protect yourself from other predators and other evil people. So, I mean, again, this is about getting clear and learning deeper about monstrous people and really figuring out like what is truly monstrous. I mean, did these people were these people truly evil, or was something bad happening to them that made them do it? Do we believe in free will and determinism? Um, like what makes someone a criminal? I almost feel like adding like criminology to this. So next we're going to talk about dualism, right? Because so once we analyzed all of the evil people and what makes someone evil, we can start looking at the evil within ourselves of light and dark, right? With the what's his face? We got, where's light and darkness dragon? Dude. right? Got our light and darkness dragon, right? Because we are dragons of light and dark. We look at the boundaries. Um, because like especially like going to pedophiles, like look, pedophiles are really bad people, obviously. I mean, it's a pretty horrible thing. But the way people react to pedophiles is really monstrous themselves. Like they're really evil too. And there's a very like sadistic and creepy pleasure and joy that people get by attacking and hurting a pedophile. Like a pedophile, it's still a human being. As monstrous as they are, they're still a person. And, when it comes to justice, anger, revolution, and the law, Nietzsche wrote, I can't remember which book, but he has this great quote: when you're dealing with monsters, be careful not to become a monster yourself. He said something like that. And it's so true. I mean, a lot of people, when they come from a place of justice, when they think they're good, when they think they're the light, they can actually be very evil. And going back to these evil people, I did have dictators here, but I put them down in the power and knowledge section. But like if you look at like Hitler or Darth Vader or Lord Voldemort, I mean maybe not Lord Voldemort, but like a lot of these people think they're doing good. A lot of these people, even if you say like they're deluded or they're not seeing reality clearly, they think they're doing the right thing. I mean, if you take Elliot Rodger, for example, it's very interesting. Like in many of his videos of him complaining as an incel, he talks about injustice being done to him. He thinks like a lot of his anger came from like a sense of injustice and unfairness. So I really want to do a video on that because I feel like a lot of people who come from justice and morality can actually be very evil themselves, right? And this is like the dualistic nature, like who's actually good or who's really bad. Um, and maybe the solution isn't really um, trying to kill the bad people, but like trying to help everyone to be more good and spotting evil and, getting rid of the evil and, that kind of thing. Um, Next, we're going to talk about demonization and scapegoats. So, like, a lot of the time, people look for a scapegoat. They look for a person to put their evil onto. So they're not really a monster, but they're turned into a monster. Or they're already monsters in some sense. And so they become even more monsters to attack and destroy and to unite, right? Like, it's another, like, power thing. This is why I go to, like, um, politics and power afterwards because demonization is something that people use all of the time to increase their power and control, like Donald Trump and immigrants or racists. Racists do this all the time to make themselves more powerful. They, destroy a race or something. We're going to talk about the other. We're going to talk about the shadow, tribalism, and mirrors. How, like, when you see two sides attacking each other, like the left and the right, you'll often find them to be very similar to each other. It's almost kind of funny. Like, I don't know, like for every right wing person or commentator, you can find a left wing person that's like basically the same character, the same personality, but they're just espousing different viewpoints. But like their character is kind of the same. It's kind of funny. Like, I don't know, if you take like Matt Walsh and Vosh, they both have a beard. They both have like these manly voices, and they talk in this very arrogant like I'm smarter than everyone else. Everyone else is stupid, even though their ideas and viewpoints are kind of narrow-minded and not very thoughtful. I mean, they don't really read books or really try to educate themselves, right? So they're kind of just talking out, they're just talking crap. I mean, even though they're on completely different sides of the spectrum, they're kind of the same. I mean, it's just funny. It's like they're mirrors of each other. Um, and when you see two sides fighting against each other, a lot of the time, especially like with dualism, if you keep if you see a fight or a clash that never seems to go away, the solution is to transcend it. you need to unite and integrate them in some way. Both sides are right and wrong. The question is, how do we get them to agree and to get to a higher place? Um, so, um, right, because if you just pick one side and try to destroy the other, it's like a bird with one wing, or it's a sickly bird that's trying to fly, but both wings are just not working. Like you want your wings to work together so that you can get to higher places. We're going to talk about minorities, women, blacks, and homosexuals. They're often demonized. And it's just interesting how the word demon is in demonized. Like you're turning someone into a cartoon demon. That's why I dress like this, because I think it's funny to kind of like show people like by dressing like a cartoon demon, by calling me a cartoon, like if you think I'm evil and you hate me, it's to kind of like, yes, I'll wear the mascot for you. But like look at the human underneath, like recognize like the humanity. Anyway, so we'll talk about witches and witch burning. Furries. I feel like furries come very close to. I mean, they literally wear mascots, so it's really easy to demonize a furry. Frankenstein plays into this, and the picture of Dorian Gray. So if you think about it, the picture of Dorian Gray is like the monstrous face of beauty, like a horrible person with a beautiful face, while Frankenstein is like a beautiful person with an ugly face, right? Frankenstein's monster. I mean, it's kind of like Frankenstein is the horror of ugliness, and then the picture of Dorian Gray is the horror of beauty. And then Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you see more of this dualism of like the good guy and the bad guy, where people like break themselves apart and they have these two personalities. Um, in more modern versions, you have Gollum and Smeagol in Lord of the Rings, right? It's like two people where there's the good and the bad. The good person wants love, the bad person wants power. And then you got Green Goblin. Um, in Spider-Man, you see those two personalities in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. And then we can just talk about goblins and orcs. I don't know if goblins and orcs have anything to do with dualism, but if I talk about the Green Goblin, I may as well talk about like what goblins are and what goblins mean. I mean, it's really interesting if you learn about like, in Lord of the Rings 2, the Two Towers. Um, and it's yeah, in Lord of the Rings 2, the Two Towers, uh uh, orcs or the Uruk-hai are kind of like the dark or ugly version of elves. They're like deformed. And so they're like made evil and ugly on purpose. Like their evil and ugliness is a face of their evil. And so, yeah, we'll talk about that. And then Satanism is like the other, like the absolute other to God. So if God is the greatest light of them all, then Satan is the greatest darkness of them all. And so Satan is definitely a monster worth talking about. And talking about the different faces of Satan, like Lucifer is actually kind of different from Satan because Lucifer means to be lucid, to be enlightened, to be free thinking, while the devil is more of like a face of whatever evil whatever anyone's idea of evil is, that's what the devil is. The devil is the face or like yeah, as I said many times before, the devil is a face or monsters are a face of evil so that we can actually find the evil and attack it. Like I already have a few monster videos already where I've talked about this stuff. But in this series I'm definitely going to go deeper or just explore different parts of like this concept. So it kind of leads to freedom, right? So like if you think about like this dualism of black and white, right, where there's the good and then there's the bad, it kind of just seems almost like a law of nature where there's always like a group or a core, and then there are people who rebel and become their own person, and it really makes you wonder, like, are they truly bad people, or are they establishing a new morality and a new way of life? Because if you think about Satan, he's often seen as a symbol of rebellion against the monarchy, because the monarchy and God was at the center, was seen as like this great light and core of beauty and love and perfection. And then Satan rebelled against it, but it's like, well, it makes you wonder, was God even a good person to begin with? Maybe he was always evil, and Satan is a light, because Satan and like the Statue of Liberty is very similar to Satan, because the Statue of Liberty carries a torch, and demons kind of like are pyromancers. They can manipulate fire. They're always in hell. Hell is kind of like, um you could say it's eternal torture, or you could say it's like kind of like this eternal sense of constantly learning and enlightening yourself. And that's kind of like what reality is. Um so yeah, so we get to freedom, and I just have a bunch of like liberty words, but like liberty, liberation, libertinism, libertarianism, equality, equilibrium, right? That root word lib, right? Libraries, deliberation, calibration, decisions. I feel like knowledge, and this is where I get to knowledge and power, because I feel like true freedom, true goodness, and it goes back to the humanities, as I said in the beginning. I think what it truly means to be a good person, what it truly means to be free. Because when I think of a monster, I think of a monster kind of trapped in their darkness and they can't get out of it. And I also think of monsters as determined. Like they didn't really have a choice to be monsters. They made their monstrous mistakes because they didn't know any better. They were limited by their knowledge. And so to truly liberate yourself, you liberate yourself with the humanities, with literature, with art, with libraries, with reading books. Um, what truly makes you human, what truly gives you the power of free will and to make your own choices, is by educating yourself in the humanities. And so knowledge is power. And this deals with epistemology, like what counts as knowledge, and where does knowledge come from, and how does knowledge shape the world and the world. Yeah, like how does it shape the world, and how does it create relationships? Because I feel like our concepts of good and evil are mostly determined by what we know. It's not so much about like how you feel, but it's like as you learn new things, your understanding of good and evil changes. It's not that there isn't a good or evil, but goodness in itself is kind of like you're always getting to a higher perspective. You're always able to see more of what's happening, and it allows you to truly see the evil and the goodness that's taking place. And that when you see people fighting with each other, it's not that the one is really good or bad. It's just that they can't see, they're not seeing eye to eye. Or I guess another way of thinking about it, and this goes back to the dualism, it's that when you see a clash, both people are looking at the same thing. I saw this meme or this picture or whatever. It was a six on the ground, right? So imagine if there's a six on the ground. There's one person here, one person here. This person sees a nine. This person sees a six. They both see the same thing in reality. They both see the number. But depending on where you're standing and how you perceive it, it looks very, very different, right? A six is very different from a nine. It's it's 3 units off, and that can totally change your perspective on things. And the reason why they're fighting is because they both see reality, but they see it just a little bit differently. Because what you'll often find is that things don't fight with each other unless they have a close knowledge um thing going on. Like it's really hard to fight with an ant or a bug or even an animal, right? Like when you fight a tiger or a lion, do you call it a monster? I mean, maybe, but you don't really see it as a monster. You see it more as like a life form that's just attacking you. And you just need to learn to navigate it. But like when you see another human being who basically has the same knowledge as you do, where you're on the right and then this person is on the left, you see them as like your enemy and you hate them. And it becomes like this moral clash. But the thing is with knowledge, like all you need to do is kind of just zoom up a little bit. And it's like, oh, if I fly over here, it's a six. If I fly over here, it's a nine. And then that's when you transcend the light and dark, and that's when you get new light and dark. Right? And it just kind of keeps going up and up. Right? Because like, and then there's some people who are like over here and they don't even see the six or the nine. They probably just see a number and they don't even care. And then there's some people who are so close to the number that they don't even see the number, right? Because most people see the six or the nine, but there's quite a few people who they're so close to the six or the nine that they don't even perceive the number as a number. So that's how that works. That's how like freedom and liberty and epistemology works. And that's where it gets to politics and power because, the more you know, the more you can kind of control and manipulate things to your advantage. If you have a perspective up here, it's like you're flying. It's like you have wings and you can kind of just go wherever you want. But if you're on the ground, you're kind of being manipulated and controlled by the forces around you. Like if you're the person who's really close to the 6 or the 9 to the point where you don't even see the number, the people who do see the 6 and the 9, they're going to control you and you're not even going to know that you're being controlled. But this is why the 6 and the 9 people are fighting so much because they know when they're controlling each other because they both have pretty much the same knowledge grasp. So that's what that means. Um, so politics and power, we're going to talk about Michel Foucault and like I'm going to talk a lot about postmodernism in this because and this is why I don't consider myself a Randian or an objectivist because again, like when knowledge perspectives and when identities become loose and they transform, rationality and logic starts to break down, or it becomes rationality and logic for a certain reality works for this reality, but it doesn't work for another reality. Or it works for this knowledge base, but not for this knowledge base, if that makes any sense. Um, it's why you need to constantly like gain new perspectives and fly around more. That way you can truly see the world. But if you're just this person who is like, I believe in rationality and logic, and but you just have this one perspective where you see the 6, you're gonna get stuck and you're gonna fight with people who see the 9. I think I've talked about that too much. I need to like get going. This video is starting to get pretty long. But yeah, so we're gonna talk about torture and punishment. I mean, there's a lot of dark things with that would be pretty interesting. Prisons, psych wards, the panopticon. I mean, Michel Foucault talks a lot about this stuff. Um, Again, this is why postmodernists are so fascinating and why it bugs me so much when objectivists ignore the postmodernists because I think the postmodernists are really talking about things that matter. Like, because I feel like once you understand objectivism and capitalism, it's like, okay, yeah, that's the right answer. But then what happens when things start to change? Then, like, the thing explodes and you need to, like, relook at all the pieces again. Um, so yeah, we're gonna talk about the different isms because I feel like people make monsters out of socialism or democracy or fascism or nationalism or utilitarianism or postmodernism and they have no idea like what they're talking about. Like when you're talking about socialism, like what does socialism actually mean? What socialism are you talking about? Who are real socialists? And then we'll talk about like Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot. Like a lot of people love to demonize them. And yeah, yeah, they're bad people. Like they killed millions of people, but it's like I think it's important to learn like why did they do it? How did they get to this point? What is it about socialism that tends to lead this way or not? Maybe it's not real socialism. Maybe it's just bloody dictatorship. I feel like it's important to ask these questions. The utility monster, is A Monster in Philosophy by Robert Nozick that I just want to talk about because of monsters. But also like utilitarianism, I think has a tendency to turn human beings into abstractions to be manipulated and controlled. Um, and that's what's monstrous about utilitarianism. And then like we'll talk about Hitler, obviously classic monster in history. And then Eichmann. Eichmann is a very interesting monster case study because right Hannah Arendt, who is, I don't know if she's a philosopher, she's more of like a political thinker or just a thinker, and she wrote this book on Eichmann. And what really surprised her, just what really surprised her about Eichmann was how, right, because Eichmann killed a bunch of people with by just doing desk work, by just like writing down numbers on sheets of paper. And that just shows you like the danger of abstractions because like abstractions are monstrous in themselves in the sense that like you can do so many powerful things by manipulating numbers and changing numbers, right? Like our world is so dependent on numbers. So if you mess up the numbers, you can do a lot of real world damage because these spiritual things, these floating numbers have so much power over the real world. And that's the thing with Eichmann. Eichmann was basically this mindless kind of idiot, this moron who killed a lot of people by just working a desk job, almost like an accountant or some kind of manager in a system. And it was so easy for him to do that. And he did it super efficiently too. Like this is why utilitarianism is kind of frightening. And like the capitalist system is because you can efficiently do a lot of damage and destruction if you're not paying attention. Again, this is why you studied the humanities, so that like when you're applying this efficient technology towards something, is it actually for good or are you doing it to efficiently kill people? Like it's terrifying, you know? And so what Hannah Arendt wrote about Eichmann that shocked her so much was like this idiot, this moron could do something so monstrous. Right? This person who didn't seem to be very dangerous at all did something very, very dangerous. This is the idea that like anyone can be a monster. I mean, there's kind of a monster in all of us that we can do evil without even realizing it. That evil is all around us. I mean, this isn't to scare you. I mean, the whole point of this monster series is to recognize evil and to not be afraid of it and to overcome it and to be better. But I mean, it's kind of like Eichmann is like just a spooky, right? He such a normal person can be very spooky. Like the average human being is kind of creepy sometimes, you know? Like just being a normal person walking down the street can just do horrible things. And it kind of makes me think of like, those like experiments. Like I saw this one video, I don't know, it could have been fake. There's so many like fake videos out there. We'll talk about that later. But there's so many you know how when people just record stuff happening and they don't do anything, right? Like I saw this video of a guy who fell into a train track and he was almost going to get run over by a train and this person just recorded him about to get run over. And it's just like what the heck, you know? Um it's crazy, honestly. So yeah, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about capitalism. So, capitalism is definitely a big monster out there. Like, a lot of people blame capitalism for everything. The system. I almost want to just put, like, the system. Like, what is the system, right? You're a cog in the machine. What is the machine? What is this thing that is eating human beings alive and controlling all of their decisions? Like, it's this big, scary monster that no one really explains. And I feel like capitalism is the same thing. I feel like capitalism is blamed for everything when it's been like the solution to a lot of things. And so I really want to talk about that. And maybe capitalism is bad. We're going to talk about billionaires and rich people, right? A lot of people love to demonize billionaires. They love to I mean, rich people are blamed for everything, and it's like, well, they're people too, you know. I mean, don't you want to? I mean, it's important to keep our humanity and to not, especially like if you revolt against rich people. Let's say you revolt against neoliberalism and capitalism. What system are you going to replace it with? What new system are you going to have? If you kill all of the rich people, what makes you think another rich class isn't going to arise? So I think it's important to, and this goes back to the idea of liberty and freedom. When you break out from the norm and the core, how do you know that this new norm won't become another core of oppression? You know, like I think it's important to like it reminds me so much of the Hunger Games where I think it was in the third one where District 13, I believe, was it District 12 or 13? District 13 took over the capital and instead of rounding up district young people to fight in the games, they rounded up capital people to fight in the games and it was a whole new oppression. It was basically the same thing but with different people. And that's why Katniss shot the leader because that leader was doing the same thing as what President Snow was doing. So, I think that's really I think that's like really important to talk about. So we're going to talk about Donald Trump. Everyone loves to hate Donald Trump. Donald Trump is demonized all of the time, and I can agree. I actually think Donald Trump needs to study the humanities. He's the person that if he would have just studied the humanities, I mean, it's actually kind of funny. Like Donald Trump is like really fixated on this tariff idea, right? For the deal and whatever. But he's flailing as a leader. He's deluded as a leader. No one seems to take him seriously, and the people who do take him seriously are just as deluded and detached as he is. And it's sad. Like he's a flailing human. Like it's I think it's amazing that the most powerful man in the world right now is so incompetent and so lost. Like look how lost he is. Like why is he the president? Why does he want to be the president? What's his actual goal? Why is he so fixated on tariffs? Don't you think that's such a weird, like, he's so lost as a person? Like, you have to feel like what goes in the mind of Donald Trump? How does he really feel and experience his life on a day to day basis? I mean, it must be terrifying in a way. I mean, a lot of people hate him and demonize him, and then he has this cult following. I mean, it has to be, I mean, his reality must just be like like chaotic. It must be the same for Elon Musk. I don't think Elon Musk is nearly as bad as Donald Trump, but like it's just I mean, again, I think it's crazy that someone like Elon Musk who is the richest man in the world is like he somehow thought like it was a good idea to get really good at a video to pretend to be good at a video game for attention or to manipulate a lot of like nerds. And then he got caught. And then like he got caught as like cheating or not actually being good at a video game. But like what was he like did he do it for attention? Why would the richest man in the world need to be seen as like one of the best players at a video game to lie about something like that? Like this is someone who needs the humanities. Like I almost don't see him as a demon because of his money, but like I just think it's like whoa, like it's just kind of crazy. We're gonna talk about the Wolf of Wall Street. Like that's like a monster. American Psycho with Patrick Bateman. He's an interesting monster. Ayn Rand. I feel like oops. Ayn Rand is constantly demonized and hated, and I just think it would be really interesting, like to like ask like why is Ayn Rand hated so much? Money. I think right. You hear that saying, "Money is the root of all evil." Ayn Rand said money is the root of all good. And it goes back to that question like, what is money? Is money a good or bad thing? It's an abstract symbol. So it has like this power over us. Um, kind of similar to the invisible hand. The invisible hand, it's kind of it. If you think about it, it's like a monster. It's like a spooky. I should actually get my. It's like woo. I will shift and move around capital and prices. And I think this is why capitalism, in a lot of the ways, the reason why it's so feared by people is because capital and capitalism is not governed by human laws. It's not governed by a person. It's not governed by a dictator or an elite or anything. Capital almost has a mind of its own and it's invisible, right? You don't see capital. You don't see billions of dollars out there. You see it in a bank account. So it's like this spiritual, abstract, floaty ghost, this invisible hand that is controlling and manipulating everything. And it really does make you wonder, like, who's in control here? Capitalism is almost kind of chaotic. It's terrifying because it's like who's real, like what is actually happening? Like how does the market actually work? It's almost like human beings are not really like there's a force working in capitalism making human beings do things that they never agreed to or something. Now, I mean, we're going to go into that. Um and then the Jews are like, why do people hate the Jews? Why is the Jews demonized so much? It goes back to, minorities, but like I think they're like the Jews are a minority, yet they're like the richest. They tend to be the richest and most successful. And I think they're often paired up with capitalism. Karl Marx hated the Jews. A lot of people hate the Jews. The Jews are blamed for all kinds of stuff. And so the Jews in itself are just really interesting. Um, And then another thing that's really interesting about capitalism is consumerism and consumption. I mean, if you think about a monster, what does a monster do? It eats. I mean, in its most literal form, why are monsters terrifying? Because they have big, sharp teeth and these wide jaws that crunch down on your body and destroy your soul because you die. And if you think about capitalism, which is an ideology of consumerism, it's almost kind of spooky. It's like an ideology of monstrosity. We're a bunch of monsters eating everything. Everything is something to be eaten, to be indulged in that and digested. So I want to talk about that. And a lot of people say the world is a dog eat dog world, which is kind of the same as like this consumerist consumption ideology that is often paired up with capitalism. Okay, next we're going to talk about incredible sizes, places, and distances. So we've been talking about the borders between like you and me, like good and evil. And like the government. There's the monarchy and then there's the peasants. There's democracy and there's the elected leader. There's the school shooter and then there's the school, right? There's the good and the bad and the good, the light and the dark. Right? We got our light and darkness dragon. But now we're reaching a point where the borders are being expanded to a ridiculous degree. And this is where we talk about incredible sizes, places, and distances. And when you stretch things to their limit, um, this is where you get to a point where you experience the sublime. The sublime is the emotion of like monsters. I feel like what do you experience when you experience a monster? You experience the sublime. There's almost like a mystical, religious, or godly feeling that comes with monsters. And so I'm going to do one episode just on the sublime. And it's kind of the same as awe and wonder. Because if you look at the universe as a whole, right, when you get to the end of the universe, if you get to, um, you know, right, when you look at the unknown, when you go out into space, when you travel across the earth to the top of the mountain on Mount Everest, to the bottom of the ocean in like the trench, or to the bottom of a lake, or the abyss, or a forbidden forest, or the jungle, I feel like you start to reach a point where you achieve awe and wonder, where you're just in awe of the mystery of the universe, where there's so much awe. Like it's like, oh my gosh. And things that have too much awe are monstrous, right? Awful. It's awful. When you see a really big monster, you're in awe of it, but it's awful. It's horrible. It's scary. But when you have some awe, it's awesome. So there's like a balance you need to find with the sublime and awe and wonder. Like you don't want to be so overwhelmed by the universe that it kills you, but you do want to be awed by the universe to feel that higher feeling. So, and then we're going to talk about mazes and labyrinths because and the minotaur, which is the monster associated with the maze. And the reason why I want to talk about mazes and labyrinths is because I feel like that's what the universe is like. When you start getting to like really big distances, it can start to feel like you're a rat in a maze and you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do, you don't know what to think. And this goes into the word amazing, right? If you're amazed by something, it's like you're in a maze. Wow, that is amazing. And then, like a labyrinth, the root word lab is in it. When you're in a labyrinth and navigating this maze and you're going in this direction over here, and when you go to that direction over there, it's like you're a scientist in a lab, in a laboratory. You're doing experiment after experiment over and over and over again. And it's like you're reaching a bunch of dead ends. It's like, where are you going exactly? When you're doing all of these experiments and you're doing all of these scientific studies, what is it that you're hoping to find? Where are you going? Do you know where you're going? Do you know how to know where you're going? And I feel like at some point you kind of need to kind of I wouldn't say give up on science, but realize that science is like this very particular nose to the grindstone kind of study of the universe where you kind of need to lift up your head, spread out your wings, and fly above the labyrinth if you can. Or look up to the sun, right? Or God. Yeah, I don't believe in God, but I feel like God is like or the sun is what sees everything, right? There's nothing new under the sun. The sun is above the maze and can see the maze. So you should look at the sun will guide you. Or like the northern star, a fixed star, that kind of thing. Um, like to get out of the maze, it's kind of like in The Hobbit when Bilbo climbs a tree and he gets a breath of fresh air. I feel like we need to like figure out like how do we find those breaths of fresh air when we're stuck in the awe and wonder of the universe, because it can be overwhelming. We'll talk about the void and emptiness, because like the darkness, there's darkness inside of it. Like if you look behind reality, sometimes you can just discover that there's nothing there. Kind of like what Nietzsche said, when you stare into the abyss stares back at you. That's like the greatest of all monsters. The sense of meaninglessness that follows us wherever we go, or death. Death and darkness is wherever we go, right? We might have this drama and wear these costumes, but if you take the costume off, there's nothing there. It's empty. I'll talk about the Calvinist paradox because I think that has a lot to do with mazes and labyrinths. The Calvinist paradox is really interesting to me, and I think applies to mazes and monsters because if you're a monster, you don't have free will. You're determined in a lot of ways. It's like you're doomed to be a monster. But then there's like this grace of God that gives you free will, which is like you recognize the monstrosity in yourself. And when you see your monstrosity, ironically, once you start to see that you're doomed to a hellish fate as a monster, you're able to kind of rise above your monstrosity. When you realize that you're actually the bad person and not the good person, you start to realize, like, wait a minute, I don't have to live this dualism of light and dark anymore. I can, I don't have to be, I can be like the light and dark dragon and fly above it all. You know, uh okay, yeah. So and then we'll talk about the unknown, right? Because if you go far enough, you just start getting to a point where you see territories that aren't there. And we'll talk about fear and phobias. Because what is the opposite of love, right? Everyone loves to talk about love. Love is so great. But like, what's the opposite of that? Fear. I feel like fear is like the darkest, most instinctual emotion that protects us. And like, if you think about a monster, what does a monster do? It makes you scared. Monsters are scary. And so we should look into fear to get a better sense of monsters. Um, uh, and then like the Medusa paralyzes you. That's like a monster that you freeze into stone, which is like the Medusa is the monstrous face of fear. And then we'll talk about snakes because snakes, I guess, are like the scariest things to human primates, to monkeys and gorillas. Like what was the big monster that terrified us? Our 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 animal ancestors. It was snakes. So I think snakes are just really interesting as a monster to look into, especially because they have no legs. I mean, if you think about primates, primates are always reaching and grabbing stuff. And then there's a snake, which is just like it doesn't reach or grab for anything. Like it's so foreign and alien to us. We'll talk about the dark. I feel like I kind of already talked about that, but like space, cosmophobia, H.P. Lovecraft and the Call of Cthulhu, right? The monster of the terrifying realization of space, like H.P. Lovecraft created monsters to capture the fear of the big world of space. It's not a world, it's beyond worlds. Aliens are monsters in themselves. And it don't you think it's interesting that immigrants are called illegal aliens? Immigrants that aren't legal are called aliens. I think that's really interesting. It's almost like we America is seen as its own planet and other countries are other planets and it's like they're right next to each other. Why would we see them as other planets? Are human beings really that different from each other when you think about it? I mean, think of a real alien. Think of that is something that's truly different from us. And so aliens are very interesting for monsters. And then Earth, cities and buildings. So cities and buildings are actually kind of terrifying, right? Like there's this really great video by Solar Sands who has a lot to do with this idea of incredible sizes and distances. But he talks a lot about buildings, and I feel like there's something terrifying about a very tall building, like a skyscraper that just goes up to the top, to the sky, and it scrapes the sky. Um, and then we'll talk about Deleuze, another postmodernist philosopher. He talks about cities. There's something terrifying about the mob, right? When you just see a city filled with so many people, it, I feel like this is where zombies come from, where zombies are the monstrous face of a big group of people, and you don't really know them as individuals. And all they do is eat and consume brains because they don't think for themselves. Zombies are people who don't think. They're just on social media all the time, right? Human beings on social media, scrolling on TikTok. They don't think for themselves. They're just consuming under capitalism. I mean, that's like a zombie. I mean, you're half dead. Are you really living? You're of living death. Terror and terrorism. This is really interesting, right? Because like the root word tear means land. So why does terror and terrorists, which have such scary connotations to them, why would land have anything to do with that? What is a terrorist doing? Is a terrorist forming new land or something? I don't know. But terrorists are pretty terrifying. And after terrorists, we get Godzilla because Godzilla is like what you'll notice is like Godzilla movies started to really take off, especially after 9/11. Um, so I mean, Godzilla is a monstrous face for a lot of things. I mean, first of all, he's huge, right? So that's what makes him monstrous. But also, Godzilla is kind of like the monster in the city. He's like he's the monstrous face of the city and the atomic bomb, right? So like the atomic bomb is this incredible force that can't be explained in any. I mean, it can be explained rationally, but to human beings, the rational answer of an atomic bomb is like, well, science sucks. Because look at what science led to. It led to the atomic bomb, this energy of mass destruction that just kills people and threatens people's lives, and then we have to create atomic bombs to protect ourselves, and it becomes this nuclear arms race. So that's what Godzilla is there for, to kind of capture the atomic bomb and how serious it is. And what the atomic bomb is actually like. It's like Godzilla ripping buildings apart and destroying everything. And then the different monsters are kind of like different aspects of the atomic bomb, or you could say natural disasters. Like Rodan is the monstrous face of volcanoes. And natural disasters are very similar to the atomic bomb because they're like these huge forces of mass destruction that, yeah, you can explain it by science, but we need like a monstrous face to explain them for the humanity to make meaning. That's another point about monsters that I really want to get across is like mo- their monstrous face put on these powerful, looming, gigantic objects and forces and distances so that we can actually relate to it. I mean, if you think about the unknown is literally unknown. Like you don't know it. So how do you relate to it? Well, you need a face. You need an interface with it. It kind of like a computer has an interface or like Facebook or Instagram, right? It has buttons that you can push on it and then it interacts with the database or the code behind it. Because if you just have the code, if you just have the chaos, how do you face it? Literally, how do you face it? Well, that's what a monster is for. Um, so yeah, climate change, tsunamis, avalanches, earthquakes. Like you'll find like a lot of gods have arisen out of these. Like I think gods are just monsters. They're monster, right? And this is why monsters aren't necessarily a bad thing. Like they can be beautiful. Monsters can be beautiful. Okay, then mountains. Dragons linger in the mountains. The Yeti lingers in the mountains. Sharks are in the ocean. The ocean is pretty terrifying. It's like space pretty much, but on Earth. I mean, and what's really interesting is about these big places is like they hold monsters in them, right? Like the ocean is an unknown place, but then there's unknowns within the ocean. There's monsters in there underneath that could eat you and swallow you up. I mean, that's what the unknown and these big things are in space. Like, space is swallowing the Earth in a lot of ways. The solar system is being swallowed by the galaxy. The galaxy is being swallowed by darkness and blackness. Okay, so yeah, these are just a bunch of different monsters and, that kind of stuff. Not to like we'll just talk about them. It is interesting for the jungle part, like spiders are really scary. Everyone's afraid of spiders, and it's like, what are spiders exactly? Why are people afraid of spiders? I don't know. Maybe it's because they have 8 legs. Like they're just, it's terrifying. Maybe because they look like hands, and if you're grabbed by a hand or something. And then I kind of get into this idea. So, like, everything I've talked about, like, I've already talked about this, like, the universe swallowing Earth and the galaxy. I kind of see the universe as just predator and prey. Everything is eating itself. It's just this constant cycle of eating and pooping and eating some more and pooping it out and death and rebirth. And I just see it as like predator and prey. And then the mouth, like I just want to talk about the mouth. Like we're going to talk about like all of these different we're going to talk about sharks and dragons, but like I want to talk about specific body parts. Like I want to talk about the mouth and the tongue and teeth. I think teeth are like the most interesting. Like I have this poem that I wrote on like reality, and I feel like teeth are like these sharp They're like constructors of reality. I mean, teeth literally pull things apart. They create new boundaries. They create new structures. Teeth are structures. They're white structures. They're pearly white structures that that just brutally tear new realities, right? As they bite into you and rip you apart. It's opening up a new reality of like your death, and this monster is going to use you for nourishment, and you will become part of the monster. And so I feel like just doing an episode on teeth would just be so interesting. Like the different kinds of teeth and how teeth came to be and how teeth actually like get in there. Um and then claws, and I don't know, and then I have like masters and slaves, which is in connection to Nietzsche, because it sounds very similar to the will to power. Um, and so I just really want to talk about the will to power. Like maybe this is why Nietzsche is so popular as a philosopher, because his ideas just underlie so much. I mean, you can even connect his ideas to monsters. But then again, maybe I'm just connecting things for no reason. But yeah. Next, um, I think I didn't know where to put this, but morality and mortality are just kind of like, I think morality has to do with life, living life, and mortality is about death. Even though morality, like amor means love, morals are like being virtuous, and then mortality is death, and like, yeah. Um, okay. Okay. So, the next section is like probably the most exciting section of monsters, probably like um my favorite part, because okay, so we talked about dualism where we make one boundary that's very black and white, and then we start to discover that maybe black and white can be changed, and then we extend the boundary to long distances to the end of the universe. Now we're going to talk about boundaries shifting, and that creates a whole new thing, right? Because it's not like, it's almost like we're not even dealing with light and dark anymore. We're dealing with like I don't know, like blue and orange, or red and green. Like it's not so much about like light and dark, but now it's just like different contrasts with each other. And these contrasts are always shifting and moving. And that's what transgressive philosophy is all about. And you have all of these French postmodern philosophers, or a lot of them, and like Marquis de Sade. I mean, I don't know what it is with the French. I feel like the French are really getting to the core of philosophy and what monsters are about. But yeah, I want to talk about all of these different philosophers. Obviously, this will take like a lot of research and time, but they talk all about this idea of boundaries being changed when identities lose their identity, and when identities become their identity, and what those implications are. We'll talk about taboos, the strange and unusual. The circus is like the perfect place for boundaries. Like, I guess you could say it's at the end when you're away from God, but like, because I said this at the beginning, but if you think about a circus, right, it's a circle, right? If you think about a Ferris wheel or the merry-go-round, everything is going in a circle. So, and there's all, I mean, Jonathan Pageau talked about this, which was really interesting. But you see, like, all of these different like mythical creatures, all of these different horses going in a circle, and that's what monsters are, right? You see all of these identities and fragmentations of God or the universe and everything, right? It's like this fragmentation where each creature becomes even more and more fragmented, and it goes in a circle. It's this continuous cycle of creatures interacting with each other. And that's what the circus represents. And one aspect of the circus are clowns, and clowns are pretty scary, but it's also interesting how clowns are funny. And what you'll find is that when you're on the edge, when you reach the end of an identity or a limit, because this has a lot to do with limits, when you talk about transgressive philosophy, things become funny. Like, yeah, it's really, really scary to be on the edge, to be at the end of an identity, but when you reach the end of an identity, it messes with your expectations of reality because you were expecting an identity to be like this, but it's totally not. Like it breaks how you see the world, which is scary, but it's also really, really funny. And that's where clowns come in. And that's where comedians come in and humor. Like what makes something funny is the fact that it's playing with identities where it becomes absurd. Well, like this is where you get absurd things. Like because if you're so used to the norm, well, I don't know. Just saying it over again. But yeah, I mean, things become funny when identities start contradicting themselves. When what you expected to happen does the opposite. And that's also the grotesque. The grotesque is the unification of horror and humor, where things are so ugly and disgusting that it's funny. Like you ever listen to a comedian and they're just so disgusting that it's fun. Like they swear all the time. Like they use swear words. I mean, and when you swear, it's seen as like a serious taboo, like gross thing. Like, ew, he used, the F word. But if you're a comedian, you use the swear word so much that it just becomes funny. It's not even a big deal anymore. One of my favorite bands is Attila. They're like a screamo deathcore band, and you could say their music is horrific and disgusting and depraved, but I like to think of it as it's hilarious. Like they're a joke on purpose. Their music is there to make you laugh and to make you think. That's another thing about humor. Humor helps you think, right? It turns the breaking of boundaries and what you know about things in a way that is funny and happy. Like you get pleasure out of breaking the boundaries between things. Um, but Attila, they use all of these swear words and they say like these ridiculous things, but it's funny. I mean, they're like comedic geniuses in a lot of ways. Um, okay, and then the carnival is very similar to the circus. Or I mean, I don't even know if they're similar, but in my brain for the longest time I've always thought that the carnival and the circus were like the same thing. I don't know why. But like it turns out that they're two separate things. And I feel like the carnival, I mean, the word carnage, carnal desires, carnivore, eating meat, right? This idea of predator and prey. The carnival is like this Dionysian, as Nietzsche would talk about. Again, I think this is why Nietzsche is so relevant, but it's like this Dionysian frenzy of chaos and eating and consuming. And this is what Saturnalia, which is another event. And Saturn is at the very end, like at the circus, and the wheel, it's at the very end. I mean, literally, Saturn is the furthest away from the sun from the naked eye, right? Obviously, there's Pluto, but like Saturn is, and Saturn goes like a Ferris wheel around the sun, right? And that's, and Saturn has to do with satire because they have the same root word, sat, right? Saturnian, right? Where you're at the like Satan. You're Satan. You're directly opposite from God, right? And so this is where you get the event of Saturnalia and the purge and the apocalypse and that kind of stuff. Gargoyles are very similar. So gargoyles are like monstrous faces outside of the church because the church is the core and the gargoyles are outside of the church. It's also where grotesques come in. So grotesques are kind of like the church, and we already talked about grotesque with comedians. And then I also want to talk about gray areas, paradoxes, liminal spaces, um, like um, yeah, like uh, bathrooms and swimming pools. Right? There's that video game called Pools, that gives you a lot of I mean, it's about liminal spaces. I think it's really interesting that bathrooms give like the strong sense of like a liminal space. And I really want to talk about that because liminal spaces are like they are the places where monsters are, or they kind of give you sublime feelings of awe and wonder, or like you just start feeling these emotions where you don't know what you're feeling. It's like this weird feeling that's not the norm. Um, yeah, so identity and transformation, sex and rebirth have everything to do with change of identities. Um, Orgasms, I just want to do an episode just talking about orgasms, especially because the French call orgasm the mini death. Um, Sexual deviancy, Marquis de Sade again. I know Marquis de Sade is in like, but I feel like he really captures like all of this stuff. Um, Sadomasochism, BDSM, pleasure and pain, right? Because I mean, what's really interesting about sex is like it's kind of painful, but it feels really good at the same time because it's really aggressive and almost violent. I mean, sex is kind of a violent act. It's a very physical act, and you're penetrating someone or being penetrated, almost like a sword, like you're getting stabbed with a sword. And after this deed, another life comes out of it, and your life kind of goes away, and you experience like an altered state of consciousness, like you're not really there. So sex and rebirth have everything to do with this change of identities. um and the phoenix is like a perfect like monster. I don't know if a phoenix would be a monster, but it's like a perfect expression of this death and rebirth. um and then death itself is like where limits become like it's like a change of limit that is really final or like serious, right? Because when we're talking about humor and comedy or like the other stuff or like taboo subjects, yeah, like you're reaching the limit and you're transforming identities and you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing. Death is like, this is what you should not do. Because once you do it, the change is so drastic and so shocking that you can't come back from it. Like, you could say death is like a transformation that is so severe that it has it has nothing to do. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like a very severe transformation. It's a very severe breaking down and bringing together identities. Um, and from this like philosophical perspective, you could almost say that death doesn't really exist. It's an illusion. Your identity is an illusion already. Like yourself is already an illusion. So when you die, it's not really that you die. The illusion of you dies, but you still live in like a different identity in a different way. Obviously, don't go around killing people, but like that's what kind of like what death is like. And like the Grim Reaper is a monstrous face of death. I want to talk about graveyards and cemeteries. Michel Foucault has an interesting lecture on graveyards. And then skeletons are like the monstrous face of like being dead. Like, why is a skeleton so scary? Probably because it's a perfect reminder of death, this looming death that follows us wherever we go. And then horror is like it's kind of like death, but like this identity is being destroyed so fast and drastically that it's horrific. The blood is gushing out. The bound like your skin, which is a boundary, is being pulled apart, and what's supposed to be kept inside in the core is suddenly out on the fringe, which is your blood, and it's all over the place and it's red and it's in your face. So yeah, I want to talk about like just an episode on blood and gore, horror movies, different horror movies. I actually don't really watch horror movies that often, but I really want to get into them now if I'm really going to understand monsters. You know, it's just in the past I've always been afraid of horror movies. um okay, so yeah. Next we're going to be talking about disease, decay, decadence, degeneracy, decline and destruction. So like if you think about earlier in this section we were basically talking about what are the boundaries, and where do the boundaries are blurred, and like figuring out the boundaries. Disease and decay is kind of like where the boundaries are solid, but you can definitely see them starting to change slowly. That's what decay is. So, I mean, if you think about disease or decay is like slow death. It's death that changes really, really slowly. And again, when it comes to disease and stuff, you have to kind of ask yourself, like, because a lot of the time with this boundary stuff, are you dying or are you growing? Right? Obviously, you're transforming, but are you transforming for the better or the worse? And you could say it's for the worse if it's a disease, because disease is like you lack ease. It's not easy. Life becomes hard. And if life becomes hard, then you're sick and you're dying. And it kind of goes back to Nietzsche with like the slave morality, and you're weak and your sickness and that kind of thing. So I just want to talk about just disease in itself. I think disease is fascinating, especially because like Lady Gaga's song "Disease." This is why she really is Mother Monster. I mean, it's perfect that she made the song "Disease." But I just want to talk about disease. Zombies are the monstrous face of diseases, obviously. I want to talk about virology, epidemic, and pandemics, different types of diseases, and why they're so scary and what makes them diseases exactly, like the bubonic plague, the Spanish flu, COVID, going viral. There's something monstrous about that. Don't you think it's kind of creepy and weird that when someone posts a video and they want to go viral, it sounds like you're spreading a plague or an illness. Like maybe going viral isn't a good thing. Like, do you really want to spread your whatever all across the planet? I don't know. Um, I want to talk about mental illness and hospitals, doctors. Michel Foucault talks about this, with doctors and stuff, and then disabilities and deformities, like conjoined twins and multiple heads, right? It's not that these people are actually monsters, but it is scary, right? Right? Because a lot of people think it's diseased, and it kind of goes back to the circus or the carnival, where you see like these freak shows, right? You see these freaks of nature. And again, when we study monsters, I really want us to keep in mind we're not doing this to make fun of people or to like, again, this goes like to the idea of like, when Nietzsche talks about sickness and then strength, when he talks about like the virtuous morality and then the slave morality, like it really makes you wonder like what really makes someone a slave? What really makes someone powerful? Because, like, yeah, like you could say disabled people are like sick or diseased, but like their way of life is unique. Like, it's a different way of life. I wouldn't call it sickness. I would say it's like an alternative way of living. And this is why monsters are like when I talked earlier about all of the different monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's kind of like an appreciation or a love, um, or like it's like a respect or love for all of the different life forms that exist in their own way of life and their own epistemologies and ontologies. Like just like a love of all of the different of God's creatures. Like like God created you just how you are. Like you're born this way, as Lady Gaga would say. Like you're not a monster, you're a beautiful life form and your own eccentricity and weirdness, and like I feel like a lot of this is appreciating like different ways of seeing the world and living in the world. Um, right, just being really open to that. So, yeah, and then like haunted mansions are really interesting, right? Because they're these huge houses, but they're in a state of decay, like they're falling apart at the same time. So we'll talk about ghosts and moving paintings because those are like scary things, scary faces, scary monstrous faces that you find in a mansion, abandoned places, autumn and the fall. So this is fascinating, right? Because and Halloween. I love how Halloween takes place during the Libra and Scorpio season in the fall. Why is that so fascinating, right? Because the fall, what is the fall? You're literally falling like the leaves from the tree. You're falling from heaven, you're falling from grace or whatever. You're in a state of decline, you're in a state of destruction and decay and disease. And so Halloween is perfect for this, right? Because Halloween is all about monsters, and monsters are often like these diseased creatures. And what is Libra season? Libra, when the sun is in the zodiac sign Libra, the sun is debilitated, right? That it's the sun is at its fall. It's literally at its fall in the sign Libra. It's exalted in Aries in the spring, but in the fall, the sun is debilitated in Libra. Why? Because the days are getting shorter now. Libra is the beginning where the days on Earth begin to get shorter. And then what is Scorpio? Scorpio is the heart of fall. It's literally the sign of death and transformation and sex and monstrosity. Like it's where you go deep, where you dive deep into the ocean or the trenches. You get into the stuff that's horrific. That's what Scorpio represents. So Halloween is so perfect. Halloween is like right after Libra season and at the beginning of Scorpio season. And when the sun is it's the sun is also conjunct my midheaven on Halloween. Just so you know, if you're an astrology person. But yeah, we're going to talk about Halloween. We're going to talk about masks and costumes, right? Because monsters, a lot of the time, a monster doesn't actually exist. As I said earlier, a monster is a face of the unknown, right? So we're going to talk about the face in itself. What is a mask? So we're going to talk about mystery and Scooby-Doo, because what is Scooby-Doo about? It's about like, right, all of these villain, right? Like what is like the theme at the end of every Scooby-Doo episode, right? It's not a real monster. It's just a guy in a mask, right? It's just unmasking. And then, you know, the villain is just like, I'm gonna get you, kids, and that dumb dog, because they've cracked the mystery, right? And that isn't that what life is about? Every monster is a mystery to be solved, basically. And then when you solve the mystery, you basically discover like, oh wow, it's just some old man behind a mask who, you know, he was making me more afraid than I needed to be. Right? Like a lot of the time fear is an illusion. Like people use your fear against you. Fear had its place in like the jungle if you were a monkey surrounded by snakes, but in the real world that we live in now, on the news and all of this stuff, fear is constantly used against you when you don't need to be afraid. There's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason to believe there's an apocalypse around the corner. Right? It's there to control you. Right? Don't let the monsters scare you. Okay, and then I want to talk about Derrida and hauntology, right? Another postmodernist. Hauntology sounds like a fascinating subject. I wasn't sure where to put it, so I just put it under Halloween. Um, and then the other thing, so decadence and decline, it's kind of like it's almost kind of like with humor and the circus where you pull like you push an identity to an extreme that becomes funny, and I think that what drag and drama is. But I also think it's like I just really want to kind of like do an individual episode on like people who really push these extremes, like the mega wealthy people. Like what is a super rich billionaire person's life uh, like? I almost feel like it would be so funny and so interesting to see one person with so much wealth that they don't even know what to do with it, or hyper intelligent people who have metaphorically bigger heads than their own bodies, or like overweight people. Again, this isn't to make fun of people, but there is something really interesting about like a 600, 800 pound person who is still alive. Like, how are they pushing that identity to its limit? And it's so interesting too, because like on YouTube, you see so many of these food channels of people just eating food. And for some weird reason, I feel like that's the perfect, like, it's like, it's like an infinite regress of consumption. Like, you're consuming content of someone consuming food. Like, it's just like a monster eating another monster eating a monster. Like, there's something infinitely regressive and spooky about just like people who eat on camera. I don't know. There's just something so like what are these people doing? Like they're just eating. Like it's almost like it's just capturing what life is about. Yeah, just consuming. That's what life is. It's just consuming. Because we're monsters and we're just, creatures who don't know what to do, and so we just eat stuff as we come along to it. And then orgies, like just the idea of like that one girl, that one woman in the news who she had sex with like over 100 guys. Like I just want to look at things like that, like just taking something to the absolute extreme before like it collapses, because I feel like that's what decadence and indulgence is. Like you eat so much food, but you still haven't gotten a heart attack. Or I don't know, you make so much money, but the poor people still haven't overthrown you. Or like the king who is so oblivious. Like I feel like the Palace of Versailles and like um Louis the 16th would be a part of this. Like he builds this extreme palace. Like what is that like before the collapse? Before, right? Because I mean everything happens in a cycle, obviously. Like identities reach their limit and then they collapse. But I'm really just interested, like, what's that point where it hasn't collapsed yet? Where it's like, how is this still standing? Like, what's going on? Okay, we're almost done. This is like the longest video I've ever posted, but I think it's so important. Next I want to talk about transhumanism. So like, okay, so we've talked about different identities and the transformation of identities, but transhumanism is literally the concept of a human being replaced by a machine. That's what transhumanism really is. And I think there is something kind of monstrous about a human like being replaced by a machine. Like it's not actually monstrous. Again, the whole point of the series is to look at what we see as monstrous and to really determine if it's actually monstrous or not, or like just to appreciate alternative ways of life. Like when human beings replace themselves with machines, is it beautiful? Is it another way of life, or is it just inhuman and creepy? I don't know. But that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Frankenstein and Prometheus because Frankenstein and Prometheus are all about creating new technology. And the whole myth of Prometheus is like what technology is about when he brings fire. And then we'll talk about Atlas Shrugged, which is like, it's like a Prometheus story. And then accelerationism and capitalism, which is kind of like, in my opinion, it's like taking this Promethean myth to the extreme, like taking technology and capital to its absolute maximum. Like what happens if technology is unchecked, if human beings are replaced and at an astronomical rate. Um, and then we'll talk about objectification, but also just because like if you think about it in a very kind of literal sense, if you take a human being and start replacing it with metal and technology, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to become objectified. You're going to turn into an object. You're going to be utilized for something, right? I mean, you're right. You're not a carbon-based life form anymore. You're a metal thing. And what are metal things and machines used for? For utilization. And it's just kind of creepy because I almost imagine a future where things will just be using things. Everything will be used for what? Like it's just an endless amount of using and using and using. But like who is really living? So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about robots, which are basically the zombie versions of the future. Robots are like mindless human beings in the future. They are also objectified human beings that have been utilized. A robot is literally a human slave. That's what robots are. They're human slaves. which is kind of creepy, you know? Like if you're going to build a slave, why are you modeling it after a human being? That's a little creepy. Um, and then one thing I've also noticed is that when you start replacing parts of yourself, when you start replacing your life with machines and objects and getting your life transformed, it becomes homogenized. So like again, human beings start to become like products. Um, right? Like if you're in a factory, right? Like if every human being gets like a Neuralink chip and every human being gets this prosthetic and every human being gets like these goggles, what's going to happen? All human beings are going to look the same. They're all going to sound the same. They're all going to talk the same. One thing I've noticed about perfection and perfectionism is that it all starts to homogenize. Like the best thing, like everyone wants to be the best, but if everyone becomes the best, then everyone becomes the same, right? It's like it's almost as if like I kind of want to believe that the best, no one should strive for the best. People should strive to be themselves, right? That there is no idea of the best. There's just being who you are the most, right? Because I mean, if you're getting all of these technological extensions, like are you really being you or are you just trying to be the best at something? So that's what I think about that. Cyborgs are literally transhumanists, like halfway through, like half of yourself has been replaced by body parts. I want to look into that. Um, Also utilitarianism, like abstracted humans, celled humans, human capital. There's something really creepy about the concept of human capital. Like human beings are, I don't know, I just think it's creepy, right? Like corporations and technology, it's almost as if human beings have become extensions or cells of technology. You know how like we have cells in our body, right? And each cell and organ works for the you as a whole. Well, now you are just another cell for the corporation. The corporation is like the new self, and you as a self don't matter anymore. But then again, is this corporation like real? Am I just imagining and projecting a face onto it? Right? I don't know. So cyborgs, objectified humans, microplastics, which is really interesting. So like not only are our bodies being replaced with metal and prosthetics, but we're getting replaced with plastic. And we probably will literally be replaced with plastic. Like a prosthetic, I can easily imagine can be made of plastic. Like, does it matter if you have plastic in your brain? I don't know. I mean, we're already losing our humanity anyway. What does it matter if half of your brain is plastic? Um, and then plastic dolls, literally, I mean, we're turning into plastic dolls. I mean, this is why it's creepy. And if you think about a plastic doll like Barbie girl, no. Oh, I should. The Barbie movie. I already made a video on this, but the Barbie movie really captures like this idea in that Barbie song. Life is plastic. Isn't it fantastic? Isn't it a fantasy, right? Because what is plastic? Plastic is malleable and movable, just like Prometheus and clay when he manipulates human beings out of clay. When humans become plastic, they become manipulative, right? They become mutable. Do you want to be mutable, right? Because it sounds like if you're able to shape and shift forms, it sounds like you're being shaped in a way to be used by somebody else, to be used by a creator, right? So that's what plastic dolls are. Plastic dolls are objectified human beings, especially for another human being, right? Like you get sex dolls and pornography, plastic surgery. I mean, you're not literally like plastic surgery has literally nothing to do with plastic, but it is kind of creepy. Like you're manipulating your face. Like it's very similar to like a monster like chewing on you and eating you up, right? It's manipulating your flesh. It's rearranging your flesh to be digested. The same way when you get a surgery on your face, your flesh is getting manipulated. It's getting changed. And what you'll notice, a lot of people who get plastic surgery, they they all look the same. All of their face look like doll faces, and I think it's creepy and weird. Um, And then, okay, prosthetics. Transgender people, I think, play a big role in this because what are they literally doing? They're manipulating their sex by changing the meat of their bodies. Should you change the meat of your body? I don't know. I feel like you're tapping into something that, you want to be careful of. Um, so there's that. The low birth rate crisis. So, like, it just seems to me like machines are taking over in a very literal way, like human beings are just going away. Like they're just we're in a state of decline in a lot of ways. Where humans are literally going away, like we're having less babies. I think that's interesting to talk about. DNA manipulation. So this is the reason why I'm not an objectivist because I don't think objectivists really take seriously the implications and the drawbacks to technology. They're the kinds of people, I mean, they're like Prometheus without much of a conscience in a lot of ways. Like I feel like they don't really think very deep into like what could happen when we create technology. So like with DNA manipulation, yeah, we can get our bodies how we want it, but like do we really want other people to control our bodies? There's a really cool story, fictional story called The All Tomorrows, where human beings learn how to manipulate their DNA, and it's just really creepy because human beings are manipulated in such a way where they become different species. Like they're human beings, but like their hands are elongated, or they turn into just squares or flaps of skin, and but they're still alive, or like they have like these elongated jaws and snouts where they look like animals. And that's the thing. This is why I feel like human beings at the end of the day are animals. Because if you start manipulating yourself, you start to look like an animal again, which makes me think like we've been animals this whole time. So, I mean, anyway, I just think like and this is the other thing. When we start manipulating our DNA and changing ourselves in many ways, we become deformities and disabled again, right? Like when we manipulate ourselves, are we actually manipulating ourselves to be superior like the Overman? Or are we diseasing ourselves, making our lives difficult? But then it kind of just makes me believe that there's just different ways of life and different creatures on Earth. Every human creature is beautiful, born in its own way, as Lady Gaga would say. So the Terminator is like literally the metal version of a human being, and it's called a Terminator. Now, obviously, this is a monster that, people are using your fear against you, but it's also kind of like how do we interact with a metal human being? It would probably look like a Terminator, right? And that's the thing with monsters is that they're kind of like testing possible futures or realities. Like if we start manipulating ourselves to look like if we become transhuman, we'll probably end up like a Terminator. Is that who we want to be? I saw this post by a friend the other day where he was like, yeah, if you get a prosthetic heart, it never skips a beat. And like, why wouldn't you want that? Wouldn't you want a perfect heart? Well, I think that's really interesting because, like, if you think about love and romance, like, you often hear people say, like, my heart skipped a beat or my heart starts to pound really strong, right? When you feel an emotion, your body has a physiological reaction to it. Like, you feel things, but, like, if you have a prosthetic heart and you fall in love with someone or you're in a scary situation, does your heart beat like really fast? Does your heart skip a beat? Like you lose your humanity. Like every time you replace a part of yourself with a metal whatever, I feel like a piece of your humanity is lost. And if you replace enough parts of yourself, at what point are you actually human or like another life form? You know, are you something completely different? Do you want to mess with that stuff? Um, Animatronics are really interesting, kind of like the Terminator. So like there's this underlying like creepy metal structure, and then when you put the skin over it, it looks like, a talking animal, right? But like underneath it looks so inhuman, which I think is interesting. Um, and then artificial intelligence, obviously that's a monster we need to tackle. Idiocracy, I feel like it's a movie, but it's also a government organization where people rule. And I feel like dumb people, like as technology rises, I think people are just getting dumber. Um, and then there's the uncanny valley, which I forgot to mention. It's when a human being is creepy. Like the more, it's basically this idea that the more human a robot becomes, the creepier it gets. Because like the more similar something is to us, the creepier it is. Like a robot as a robot is not creepy. But when it starts to become more and more human, almost like one of us, it feels like it's invading, it feels like an invader, like a virus or something. Like it's like a foreigner trying to get in and it becomes creepy. Um, and then meta reality. So meta reality is like, basically all of these rich companies, rich people are competing to take over our own reality, and that's where the Matrix comes in. The Matrix. You also get infinite regress, and like so. This is really interesting to me because I feel like a meta reality is like kind of going down into hell. It's like because we're like human beings are becoming gods. Well, first of all, we're monsters already. But then we're monsters playing God. And then when we play God, we create our own monsters. And then we create another depth of hell. And then that depth of hell will create their monsters and their reality. And you see how like you get all of these different realities and right because on the metaverse there's right? You get your own ontology and logic to the metaverse, right? Like the logic of like the pixels on the screen and the buttons that you can like the meta reality is going to determine your like these rich people who are inventing these goggles and these alternative realities, they're going to be able to control your life. Like you're going to be predetermined. This is why I feel like monsters are predetermined because it's like God has control over you. He's already decided who and who you're not going to be. This is why I'm so interested in Calvinism and the Calvinist paradox because like you see what's happening. Like your free will is going away. Like you're only going to make choices within the the simulation, the meta reality. But this meta reality has already its inbuilt logic and its inbuilt ontology. I don't know if I'm using ontology right, but like its own like metaphysics, its own like nature of what it is, right? And so you can only act within it, which is I don't know, it's just creepy. So we need to talk about that. And then last, we're going to talk about abstractions and gods, right? Because the meta reality is just a bunch of abstractions on a screen that that aren't really real. And so I think we're going to talk about fixed ideas and spooks because right, spooks. Max Stirner talks about like his main idea was against fixed ideas and he calls them spooks, which is like ghosts. So I think that's really interesting. Like it's a creepy monster, phantasms and ghosts. But then I want to talk about gods because I think gods are basically a bunch of monstrous faces that capture all of these different identities and realities and stories and like how the universe plays out. And I think if you learn the stories and the myths and Christianity and Jungian archetypes and the astrology and the zodiac signs and Egyptian myths and Greek Roman myths and all of the other myths, I think you're going to have you're going to understand reality because these are the monstrous faces that help us gauge with the unknown or the greatest distances possible to us, right? Because what is God? God is a face for the universe. He's a face for the end of time, for the end of the universe, right? Because we can't actually engage with the end of the universe. But if we put a face on it, we can actually face it, we can interface with it, and then we can understand it. So I want to talk about that. And then just Lady Gaga. She's like, I think she is the musician and the artist of monsters because she has an album, The Fame Monster, Born This Way, and Mayhem with her single on Mayhem Disease. And I mean, she's just, I really just want to talk about her music because I think it plays into Monsters really, really well. So, holy cow. That was a super ridiculously long video. And I know I talked a lot and over talked myself. And I don't know. I just really needed to get all of this out there and talk about it because it's important to me. And yeah, I'll see you later. Goodbye.